Hello, welcome back to my knitting channel podcast. I hope you've been well. I have a lot of finished objects to talk about today because I've kind of been on a knitting kick recently, and I thought I would come on here and just talk through some of the things that I finished lately, and only a couple of whips that I have going on at the moment, and maybe some plans for things that I want to cast on in the next couple of weeks and months as we start to head into winter in Australia, which is a very exciting time if you like knitting. I feel like I haven't really gotten to wear a lot of knits yet this year because it's still pretty warm in Sydney, even though it's at least a couple of weeks into autumn. So hopefully the weather will change soon and we will see some cooler weather. I think next week it's going to start to drop down to like the high 20 degrees Celsius. Looking forward to getting to wear some warm woolen things and continue this knitting kick as we kind of ease into winter. But I have, how many finished objects? 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 finished objects to talk about, which I don't have all in front of me, so I'll have to run and get a couple, but a couple of jumpers for myself and some smaller things, and a couple of whips that I'm working on. So I will just get into it. Firstly, off the needles, since last time I was on here, is my Esther sweater by Petite Knit. This, here she is, in all of her glory. So this is a jumper I'm very happy with, one that I started knitting in October last year. I'm really blending in with my background with this color. So I started knitting my Esther jumper in October last year, and I had the wool for this jumper for at least a year before that, but I had gotten the wrong weight wool combination, and so I was putting off knitting it because I couldn't decide what to do in terms of moving ahead and starting it, and whether to get different wool or use the wool that I had. But I just prior to starting this one, I just knitted the baby version of the Esther jumper late last year, and so I had the pattern, I had the stitch pattern memorized, and I really enjoyed knitting the baby version, and I just thought I'm gonna bite the bullet and use the wool that I have and knit the Esther jumper for myself. So the wool that I used is Durara Natura Ulysse in the colour Creme Anglaise, held with the Isaya mohair in, I think, colour 59, so they're kind of like pale yellow colour. The Durara Natura Ulysse is a 5-ply wool, and I did buy it with the intention of knitting the Esther jumper, but I think I just thought that it was an 8-ply wool, and the pattern calls for like a 10-ply weight to meet gauge, and so the wool that I'd bought was really kind of like an 8-ply DK gauge all up. So when I gauge swatched and I used the recommended needles for the pattern, I was obviously not meeting gauge, and my swatch was quite a bit smaller, and but I really liked the fabric that it produced, so it was like the stitches really well defined, and so I sized up to a 4.5mm needle. The pattern recommends a 4mm, and I managed to get gauge with the wool that I had, but I didn't like the fabric as much because it was kind of, the stitches weren't quite as defined and neat, and the fabric was like the fabric was a looser gauge, so it seemed a little bit more see-through. And so, yeah, that was why I kind of held off making it, because I wasn't sure whether I would get another, like I should hold another strand of mohair to get the weight for the pattern, or buy other wool altogether. But I ended up just using the wool I had and using the bigger needles, and it's created this really kind of drapey, lightweight jumper in the end that I really like. And even though it's slightly, the fabric's not quite as dense, and it's slightly, like it's not sheer, but if you're wearing a black t-shirt underneath, you'd be able to see the black t-shirt. That doesn't really bother me that much. I just kind of wear lighter shirts. Well, I haven't really worn this that much, but I will wear lighter shirts underneath it so that the color doesn't kind of peek through the fabric. And I really am happy with the jumper in the end, so I'm glad I cast it on and just used the wool that I had, because I really like the color. I wanted like a buttery yellow jumper. I think butter yellow was really in at the time that I bought the wool, and then it's probably out now because I didn't knit it for so long. But yes, I really like the color, and that's my Esther jumper by Petite Knit. I didn't make any modifications to the pattern except for knitting the ribbing a little bit shorter, which I usually do on jumpers anyway, because I just kind of get sick of knitting ribbing. And so I knitted the ribbing a little bit shorter than the pattern recommends. And I knitted the folded over collar option, and I think there is like a mock neck option as well in the pattern. The only thing I would do differently if I was going to knit this pattern again is to make sure when I pick up stitches at the shoulder seam that they are lined up and the pattern lines up. So you can see here at the shoulder seam, the pattern doesn't quite match, but you could easily make it line up if you just picked up enough, stitches. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know why I can't verbalize this. Next time, I would pick up stitches so that the pattern lines up at the shoulder seam, because it doesn't line up. And I only realized that after I'd already knitted one shoulder, and I didn't want to undo it, and so I just matched the two shoulders so that they're misaligned. You really don't notice it very much because that seam sits right on top of the shoulder, so you're kind of only looking at the back or the front of the jumper. But yeah, the pattern doesn't mention anything about, making sure when you pick up the stitches, you should make sure the pattern lines up at the seam. So if you haven't knitted it and you're going to knit it or want to knit it, that's just something to be mindful of, so you can get the pattern to line up there. But that is my Esther jumper. I'm very excited to wear that when the weather gets cold. My next finished object is another jumper for myself, which is pretty much unheard of. I don't think I've ever knitted a jumper in this shorter time span of like 2 months, and finish two jumpers back to back, like full-size adult jumpers. But that probably speaks to this next pattern and how much I enjoyed knitting it, and so how quickly it knit up for me. But this is my Treilis Pullover by Ailbiona Mclochlainn. This is such a nice pattern. I really, really enjoyed knitting it. It's a very well written pattern. It's very simple, and it is very cozy, and it kind of turned out exactly as I had hoped. So this is an 8-ply weight pattern, and kind of an all over cable design. It's a very simple construction and simple knit, I think, because even though it's got the cables, it's quite a simple cable pattern, and obviously it's just repeated all the way around, and it is like, the construction doesn't feature a lot of kind of increases or decreases. It's very kind of straight up and down. Again, you start knitting the back panel, then you pick up for the shoulders, so similar construction to the Esther. You knit the front, and then you join the body and knit in the round, and then the sleeves are just picked up and knit in the round, and again, no decreases or anything, and that's partly because the cables, like the designer talks about in the pattern, the cables don't really lend themselves to kind of decreasing. You kind of just have to, you know, knit columns of cables in the pattern, but it works very well because it's just, you know, comfy, oversized, simple. The wool that I used for this jumper is a wool that's local to me, and it is from a yarn maker called Tandy, based down in Victoria, Australia, and it is their 8-ply undyed Polwarth wool, 100% wool from their Polwarth sheep, and it is, I really wanted to use an undyed kind of browny grey wool for this pattern, so I had a look at like lots of different options. There was a Yorkshire Spinners, that UK yarn brand, West Yorkshire Spinners, they have an undyed 100% wool in a similar kind of taupey, warm grey brown colour, which I almost used for this jumper, but then I wanted to use something that was from Australia if I could, because there's lots of great wool here, and support a local, you know, yarn producer. So I ended up going with this one. I'm very happy. The yarn is beautiful. It has that really sheepy smell to it, and it's very, very soft and squishy. The only kind of bugbear I have about this yarn is I have worn this jumper like twice, and you can see how much it's already started to pill on the shoulder. I'm hopeful, maybe blindly optimistic, that this is just kind of the yarn settling into itself, and after a couple of, you know, 1 or 2 goes at deep pilling it, it won't pill as much anymore. That's probably naive, but nonetheless, I can see myself getting a lot of wear out of this jumper, especially just around the house as like a cozy jumper on cold winter days. So even if it does end up pilling a lot, you know, that's okay. That's just part and parcel of wearing soft, cozy wool sometimes. Again, I didn't make any modifications of this pattern. I think there are a couple of collar options in the pattern described as well, but I've gone for the mock neck. I think there's a folded over collar, or maybe like a full turtleneck collar, and there are options as well for the sleeves and the hem, or like the cuffs and the hem to either be cinched or straight, and I went for the straight cuffs and hem. And the arm looks very short here, but again, that's because it is a drop shoulder construction, so the shoulder kind of sits here and the arm is, yeah, really that long. But yes, really highly recommend this pattern and this designer. I remember as soon as I'm signed up to Ailbiona Mclochlainn's newsletter that she releases every week. She often releases a pattern, like most weeks, and she released this kind of, I think, September last year, and I remember buying it as soon as I saw it because I knew I was going to knit it. It was just such a striking pattern with the cables, and I've really fallen in love with knitting cables, so I do envisage some more cable projects in my future. And this was also one of my Make 9 objectives for this year, albeit when I kind of worked out my Mclochlainn, I had already started this jumper, so I knew I was going to be knitting it, but still, I have completed this jumper, and yeah, very excited to wear that one as well. And I think that one I started in February and finished it just at the end of March. So yeah, as I said, probably the quickest I've knitted a jumper. And I made the size 2 for that one. And for the Esther sweater, so I think I made the size small. And I think, broadly speaking, I got gauge. Like I was on track for gauge for both of them. I think that is all there is to say about that one. Next finished object, another very speedy knit because I enjoyed knitting it so much, is my Peppy pattern. It's kind of a scarf shawl pattern by Lily Kate Makes that was published in, I think, issue 20 of Liner magazine. It's just called Peppy, the pattern, but it is a scarf shawl. So this is my Peppy that I just knitted up. I discovered this pattern when I was in Canberra a couple of weekends ago for the Australian Yarn Show, and while I was there, I went to a little yarn shop in Manuka in Canberra, in the suburb of Manuka, called the Wool Shed, and they had a sample knitted up of this little scarf at the shop, and they'd used some Zilana possum cashmere wool for the sample in very similar colours to this, and I just fell in love with it and decided that I wanted to knit one as well. So I bought this same colour pink that was featured in the sample at the shop, which they had for sale. The wool is Zilana Air, so it's a wool cashmere possum blend from New Zealand, and they knitted it in pink, and then for the variegated they used a ball of the cream, and they didn't have any cream left, but they had their kind of natural colour, which is like a more grey oyster colour. So I picked up a ball of that because I actually quite liked the natural colour and thought that would go very well. And then both the pink and the natural are knitted together with a strand of mohair in kind of a pink colour, matching the pink Zilana wool. They didn't have the mohair in the shop, they'd sold out. So when I was at the wool, like the yarn show, I looked for a mohair that I could hold together with the two colours, and I actually found not a mohair but a Suri alpaca that was super soft, and it was the perfect colour match for this pink. It was probably a little bit, actually that's probably pretty true to the colour, so it closely matches this one, and then you can see it creates that variegated effect for the other triangle. And yeah, so I started knitting this like I think last week, and it was just like over the Easter weekend I just only wanted to knit on this. In the car when we were driving down the coast I was knitting this, and then just over the weekend. The wool is so nice to knit with. Obviously it's very soft because it has the cashmere and the possum, and I was using my Knit Pro Symphony needles, which are the kind of laminated birch needles, which I have been enjoying using a lot recently. Kind of prefer those to metal needles depending on the project, but I think the combination of those needles and this wool was just divine and so enjoyable. So the way that it is knit is you knit each of these triangles separately. So you cast on at the edge, and then you do some decreases and lots of wraps and turns. Like if you've ever knitted the half and half triangles wrap by Pearl Soho, it's kind of similar construction, but it creates an uneven triangle, a scalene triangle. And then you bind the two, you kind of hold the stitches, and then you kind of bind off the stitches, bind off the two triangles together using an I-cord bind off. And I used a contrast colour for the I-cord bind off, which I think is recommended in the pattern. This is just 2 strands of a kind of burgundy mohair held together that I had in stash there. So the pattern pictures and the pattern itself recommends or like suggests casting on using, I'm pretty sure using the colours from the other triangle to cast on, and then you like it creates a contrasting edge for each of the triangles, and then you kind of have a third colour that you use for the I-cord bind off, but I just knit the triangles respectively in one colour, and then I did a contrast for the bind off. The shape of it reminds me a little bit of a stingray, if you can kind of see, which I quite like. And the pattern also recommends using, like casting on very loosely so that the edge isn't too tight. I used the German twisted cast on, which I use for socks, or I started using for socks recently, and that seems to have worked quite well in terms of the edge not being too tight, the cast on edge. And yeah, I was really off gauge for the project as well, as I discovered when I cast it off and then measured it and realized my scarf was about 10 centimeters shorter in length, so this ways, than the pattern describes. So, and I sized up needle size, so I think the pattern recommends 3.75 millimeter needles, and I used 4 millimeters, and I was still really off gauge, so I must have been knitting quite tightly, which I think I'm discovering about myself, that I am actually a tight knitter now that I'm actually paying a lot more attention to gauge and measuring my work as I go and when it's finished. So it's kind of a funny length, like it's not really long enough to tie it without it looking a little bit awkward, but you could just kind of hold it around your shoulders. This is the smaller of the 2 sizes in the pattern as well, so there is a larger version. What I kind of want to do, I mean, I was going to give this to a friend, but I feel like it's just an awkward length that she might not even get to wear it, but I might still give it to her because it is a nice scarf just to touch and hold. And it does add a bit of interest, like if you were going to just wrap it around your neck. And, you know, adds a bit of warmth. But you could, I want to get something that you could just slide up the scarf and connect it here, so it kind of can stay on your neck, but I'm not sure what that could be. So if you have any ideas, do let me know. Otherwise I'll just do a bit of Googling and see if I can come up with something. But yes, that's my Peppy pattern. I want to make like 8 more of these, and I want to make one in the bigger size that's more of a shawl. I will probably size up needle size for this pattern if I make it again, and maybe, well, jump to a 4.5 millimeter needle, so that I actually get gauged next time and it's a bit more practical, the finished object. But it's still very nice to have, and I am very happy with my Peppy pattern. My not quite finished object, but finished enough that I'm going to talk about it. Well, next finished object is Billie the Raccoon from the Cinthia Valet book Moosh and Friends. She's not finished because I haven't sewn up her little final bit of her body, but she has been washed and stuffed and her tail has been knitted, mostly because I needed the needles to start a pair of socks. So I really was like, I'm just going to finally finish this. She's been sitting on my needles for quite a few months in varying states of completion. I think last time I talked about her, she might have just been a disembodied head, or maybe she had some arms as well, but now she's got some legs, a body, a tail, and she is very happy. So she is going to join my Moosh the bear. Her face looks a little bit funny and misshapen, but I promise she is actually quite, like in real life, I think I haven't put any stuffing in her nose, and I think I need to do that so she's just a bit more fleshed out, but I don't know what I'm trying to do. There she is. She's happy. She does have two eyes, you just can't see in the light. And her head's a bit wonky, which happened with Moosh. My mum actually knitted Moosh the bear, and I wanted Moosh to have a little friend, but Moosh also had his head slightly tilted towards the left. So I don't know why that happens, if it's just like a right-handed knitting thing. Maybe if you were left-handed, the head would tilt the other way, or maybe it's just like how the pattern turns out, but yes. Billie was knitted up in some scrap yarn that I had in stash. The white is just some kind of 4-ply Bendigo woolen mill scrap, and then the charcoal and the grey is a soft Donegal tweed yarn that I had, again a 4-ply yarn, and yeah, so I'm really happy with how she's turned out. I really like the tweediness of her body and the way the wool's knitted up. I have a bunch of this grey wool that I bought to knit myself a cardigan, and then I never knit it because I wasn't sure if I liked the grey wool after I bought it all, but now knitting up Billie, I actually feel like I really do like the grey, and I will endeavour to turn that into a jumper soon. So yeah, the pattern was really fun to knit. It's not like a project that you can really take out and about and knit on anywhere, even though it's a small project, mainly because you just have to go line by line with the pattern and follow the instructions quite closely in the book, because every row that you knit is different in terms of decreases and increases, and it's very clever the way it's designed, because it's completely seamless. You just knit and slowly this little creature emerges, and then I think the only place you have to kind of pick up stitches is the ears that you add on separately, and the tail, but otherwise you kind of just knit and occasionally hold stitches on scrap yarn and things, and yeah, it's amazing, the patterns. It was really fun to knit and fun to watch the little animal emerge. It is a bit hard in your hands just with the tiny needles, or at least it was for me, and the kind of the small circumferences that you're knitting on, but if you don't mind that too much, it's a fun pattern to knit. And I do want to knit more little animals from the book, because I have the book. Maybe Nana, the lady duck, they all have little outfits, and her outfit is this really sweet little colourful dress. So yeah, maybe Nana will join Billie and Moosh at some point in the future. But yeah, there she is. I will sew her up very soon. My next finished object is another Holger sweater. This is a petite knit pattern. It's a little kid's jumper, and I knitted this one for my friend's daughter who's turning 2 in April. This is a really fun pattern to knit because you get to play around with colour, and sometimes if you're clever you can use it to use up stash yarn. I bought all new yarn for this because I wanted it to be superwash, so it was easy to throw in the wash, and I don't have a lot of superwash yarn in stash, and I wanted it to, you know, to pick colours that really went nicely together because it is for a friend's you know, baby's birthday. This is like the kids version of the Holger sweater, if you're familiar with that pattern. I knitted this up in various superwash wools. Some of them I got at the Australian Yarn Show. The stripes, the wool for the stripes, the brown and the kind of natural white colour, and the red for the collar are from Nundle Woolen Mill, which is an Australian yarn producer. And then the arms are knit up in, this one is a Fiddlesticks 8-ply, and this one is a Bellissimo 8-ply, both superwash. The colours will be on my Ravelry if you are interested. I knitted up the 3 to 4 years old size, so the third size in the pattern, and I was off gauge a little bit. I think I was off gauge. My stitches, when I was measuring them, it's meant to be a 20 stitch pattern, 20 stitch gauge pattern, and I was getting like 22.5 stitches per 10 centimeters. But then when I measured the chest circumference after I'd blocked it, it was pretty much, I think it was like 2 centimeters out, which isn't huge. So, I mean, it will definitely fit her. I picked the size 3 to 4 years because she's turning 2 and I wanted her to just be able to wear it a lot and go into it. But yeah, even if it's a bit smaller than it was meant to be, it will obviously be fine. I didn't really make any pattern modifications, except that the pattern suggests knitting the hem in another colour, and I just used the brown wool for the stripes that I already had. You can see down the right hand side of the jumper there is a visible line where I was changing stripe colours, and I mean they're technically jogless stripes, but when I started doing the stripes I had to look up instructions for how to do jogless stripes, and I have the Patty Lyons knitting book of tricks, and that says that for jogless stripes you should, you pick up the stitch from the row beneath once you've started, done your one row of your new colour, and then you should move the marker 1 stitch every time you do that. And so I was doing that, and I started to move the beginning of the row, like I got this diagonal line because that was where I was moving the beginning of the row each time. And then I was looking up other instructions because I noticed I was getting this diagonal line and I really didn't like it, and turns out you actually don't have to move the marker because the stitches will all be fine. If you it will all just line up and you'll still get the right number of stitches in each stripe if you don't move the marker. So you don't have to move the marker. So I started moving the marker and then I stopped doing it, and then the line kind of ran down the front of the jumper instead of down the side where it would have gone if I just left the marker where it was. So anyway, all that to say, if you're doing jogless stripes, you don't need to move the marker, just leave it where it is, and I will do that next time. I did rip back a bit because I think the line had started to come out to like here, but I didn't rip back all the way, and look, it's not the end of the world. It is a jumper for a child, so it will be very functional. It does annoy me, but that's life. I thought it might block out a bit better than it does, but you know what, it's just an interesting quirk of the jumper now, and that is the beauty of hand knits, I think. So that is my second Holger sweater because I knitted one last year. Actually, the only thing that I did change about the pattern is I used 3mm needles for the ribbing and the collar and the cuffs and everything. I think the pattern recommends 3.5mm, but I find 3mm just makes my ribbing that much neater. And my last finished object to talk about is a pair of pretty basic socks with a forethought heel. These socks are knitted up in another local yarn to me, which is Circus, well I say local, I mean like Australia, Circus Tonic handmade sock yarn in their birthday party sock set, which was like a limited run sock set that the dyer was selling over December, I think, and so I bought some when I was buying some other yarn for a project to be my Christmas cast on, and they weren't my Christmas cast on, they ended up being my New Year's Eve cast on. But I have finally finished the toe of the second sock and can call these, and woven in all the ends and block them, so they're officially a finished object, and I've even worn them. It's a pretty basic sock pattern, just all stockinette, using the kind of broadly using instructions from the Summerlee sock project book, and it was my first time knitting a forethought heel, where you knit basically the socks as a whole tube, but when you get to a certain point you put some stitches on hold and put some waste yarn in there, and then you go back and pick up those stitches and knit the heel. I did not like this heel construction. I found that there was little holes in the sides of the forethought heel, even though I picked up all the stitches, so you kind of have to pick up extra stitches to avoid those holes, and then like weave in the ends cleverly to fix the holes in post. And I just didn't like having to do all of that. I much prefer doing a heel flap and gusset, which I know a lot of people don't like that sock construction, but I really don't mind it, and I think it creates a neat heel. So I'm glad I tried the forethought heel, but it is not my sock heel construction of choice. And yeah, these are a 64 stitch, not gauge, but like 64 stitch size sock, which is works pretty well for my feet. So that is my kind of basic birthday party socks. In terms of whips, and sorry if you can hear my dog click-clacking on the floor around me, I have kind of 3 whips on the go at the moment, so which is pretty incredible. I actually think I've worked down a lot of my whips, and I'm now getting very excited to treat myself with some more cast-ons in the not too distant future. The first whip that I started since I kind of last made a video is the vest number 3 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This is a vest that I'm knitting for my mother-in-law, and she requested a chartreuse vest, and I sent her some vest patterns, and she picked this one, which is a very chunky weight. As you can probably tell, it's pretty much equivalent, I think, to a 20 weight, 20 ply weight garment. So it's 2 strands of 8 ply wool held together with a 3 ply alpaca suri wool. So it's knitting up very quickly, and that's why I've made so much progress on it. And I haven't been knitting on this that dedicatedly. I bought most of the yarn for this at the Australian Yarn Show. The 8 ply wool is a wool from Bellevue Park. This is the 8 ply Bellevue Park Woolen Mills, or Bellevue Park wool, which is a very soft, squishy merino. Sorry, Slinky, my dog, has just laid down on top of the pile of knitwear next to me. This is, yes, an 8 ply wool in the colour olive. It's a hand-dyed wool, as you can probably tell by the level of variation in the dye kind of being picked up on the wool itself. It's very soft merino sheep that they breed specially to get like the softest yarn, and it is being held with a very true chartreuse. The camera's kind of not picking up the colour that perfectly. I don't know if it's because of the yellow behind it. It's like a little bit more green. This looks quite gold on camera, but there's more acid green in real life. This is an Indicita alpaca, Suri alpaca. I probably said mohair at some point there. It's a Suri alpaca, 3-ply. And it's being knit up on 10mm needles, which are huge, and I had to buy specially for the project. There's my symphonies, which I'm loving recently. The pattern calls for 9mm needles, but I am knitting very tightly at the moment, and so I sized up to 10mm needles to get gauge, and I think I was like half a stitch off still. It's like a 10 stitch gauge, so it's, or 10.5 stitch gauge, and I think I was getting 11. So it's pretty, yeah, quick to knit up. And yeah, I don't think I have that much to say about this pattern, but yeah, she requested a vest, she picked this pattern, and I was very happy to knit it for her as an early birthday present. And I tried it on her over Easter, and it looks like it fits pretty well, and she seemed happy with it. So I am aiming to have that finished in the next couple of weeks so that she can take it away on her holiday with her when she goes at the beginning of May. The other item that I have just cast on as well, which is my other whip, because I wanted something that I could, that one's a bit, the vest is a bit tricky, like it's a bit big and chunky and too much wool to take with me when I go in the car and go different places. So I wanted to cast on a project that I could take with me, something portable. And so I have cast on just yesterday, the Sardinella socks by Quince & Co, I think is the designer, maybe. I will say somewhere in the video what they are. This is the little sardine fish colorwork socks that I saw these in Two Pearls in a Pod's video recently, and they were just so cute. And I bought this wool, this sock wool, at the Australian Yarn Show. It's a Ren and Ollie variegated sock yarn that I saw and instantly knew I wanted a pair of socks in these. And I was trying to think, do I want like a rib sock or do I just do a plain sock, because I really like the color and I wanted that to shine through. And then I saw the Sardinella socks and I thought, could I get away with having this as the base color and then using a darker color for the color work? And I think it's actually working really well. I had some socks, what is it? A different sock yarn. Did I put that here? This is it. Socks, yeah. Sock yarn in stash, Coop Knits, in this kind of navy color. That is definitely, I think, providing enough contrast and also kind of matches some of the colors in the base of the base yarn and this pink variegated yarn. So very happy with this combination. Very happy with these socks, and it is my first time knitting colorwork socks, I'm pretty sure. I haven't knitted that many socks. I think all the socks I've knitted have just been like plain. So I am interested to see how I go with the floats and the tightness, and I know a lot of people often struggle to get colorwork socks on after all that effort, but I'm just using this as a bit of a trial and error process. If I have to rip back and they don't go over my feet, that's okay. I'm kind of expecting it because it's the first time I am doing colorwork socks. The pattern does recommend sizing up a needle size, so these are knitted on 2.25mm. For the colorwork, sizing up to 2.5mm needles, which I've done, and I also generally knit socks continental, so I'm an English knitter, which I think adds to, or like explains a little bit of the tightness of my knitting. But for socks knitted on small circumference in the round, I find it a lot easier to knit continental with the yarn held in my left hand, but I can only knit continental knitting, like stockinette. No, I can't do pearls continental. One day I would like to learn, but at the moment I can't. And the other thing that, my continental knitting is a lot looser than my English knitting. So when I knit socks in the round on small circumference, they do tend to be a little bit looser, which hopefully will help with the colour work and getting over my feet. And then the last thing the pattern recommends or does to help with reduce the tightness of the colour work is after the ribbing is done, you do a round of increases before you do the colour work, and then you do the colour work. So yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling confident. I don't think my floats look too tight. I think they look kind of loose. So we'll see. I'll report back on how this goes. But the yarn is knitting up beautifully. I love this pink, and I'm happy with how this is all turning out, and using wool in stash as well. And it's a very cute pattern. So that is my kind of on-the-go project. Obviously the colour work chart is a little bit like you have to follow it quite closely, and you can't just knit it without paying attention. But once you do, it's just kind of a band of little fish on the cuff of the sock, and then once you're past that, it's all pretty, just knitting with the pink wool. So I will be able to take that on the go with me. And then my last WIP, which is a very long-standing WIP, but it's one I'm hoping to pick up again and finish in the next month or so that I can get another thing off my needles, is my Humber socks by a designer who it's been so long since I started these, I can't remember, but I will put the name up somewhere here. These are a kind of simple lace work pattern sock that I'm knitting up in another Zilana wool actually. This is the Zilana Cozy, C-O-Z-I, knitted up in the colour custard. And I started knitting these socks this is the first pair of socks that I ever started knitting actually. I'm trying to work if I did a stretchy cast on for these. That would be very advanced of me to do from when I started knitting these years ago, but they feel very stretchy. I started knitting these probably in 2022, and for some reason I used a 2mm needle to knit this, so you can see how small the stitches are and how dense the fabric is. I have no idea why I did that, because the pattern calls for a 2.25mm needle. I think probably 2mm was the only needle I had, and I didn't want to buy a new needle, or I just wanted to cast on straight away, so I did that. And so it's very neat, and it's very thick and dense, the fabric, and quite structured for a sock. It's not very drapey, but it's a sock and it fits my foot nonetheless, which is quite small, as you can tell. I have a size 37 foot, so it does make knitting socks easier because you don't have to knit for as long. They're quite quick to knit up. I made my boyfriend a pair of socks last year, and they took bloody forever because he has much bigger feet. Heel flap and gusset, heel construction, and very easy to memorize lace pattern in the round. But I knitted a whole sock, and then I think I just lost interest, and so I never cast on the next sock. So I think last January 2025, I picked these up again and started knitting the second sock. And then I ran out of wool because I only had one ball of the wool. And then when I was in Canberra at the Wool Shed yarn shop, I saw that they had a ball of the Zalana Cozy in the colour custard, so I picked it up and I'm now going to finish off these socks finally. The dye lot will almost certainly be different, so I'm sure the colour change will be quite obvious when I start the next ball, but that's fine. I just want to finish them at this point. And here is the yarn, Zalana Cozy in custard. So that's the Humber socks. That is pretty much all my active whips. I think I have like one or two other things that are really long standing that are just in hibernation at the moment. But I have cleared a lot of stuff off the needles in the last few weeks really. So I am looking forward to casting some new things on. I would like to knit, I think, the Basil cardigan by Savory Knitting, which is one of the kind of options I talked about in my Make 9. Maybe the cloud sweater by Petite knit. They're both kind of just plain stockinette single color knits, which I haven't done in a little while. I do get quite bored of knitting just stockinette and plain colors, so I don't want to cast on like too many plain stockinette projects. I think just one is probably enough, but that's kind of my next thoughts. I need to find a wool for each of them though that I really like and I want a whole jumper in or a whole garment in. So I'm kind of on the hunt for that, and maybe I think in the next couple of days I might get the chance to go to the yarn shop to have a look for some wool for one of those projects. Maybe another Peppy scarf. That wasn't on my Make 9, but I do kind of, I just enjoyed this so much, and I literally knit it up in the space of a week, very unexpectedly. I didn't want to stop knitting it, and I kind of want to knit another one. But as I said, maybe the bigger size, and hopefully on gauge this time. So yeah, maybe another one of these on my needles. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me talk about all the things that I've had on and off my needles recently. And hopefully talk to you again soon.